Sarge.
Il est passé. Super, l'artiste. Super, encore un but sensationnel.
That's a brilliant bit of follow-up play by Mackay.
Oh my goodness me, what a shot.
Sagosen setter det hen! Han setter den! Vi er i semifinale igjen!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Morning Club. It's Chris here with you, and joining us for our Morning Club to talk about the potential future of handball in the Winter Olympics is the man I know best placed to talk about this, handball journalist for the European Handball Federation, but also working for the Associated Press, covering all things skiing and winter sports. Eric Willemsen, how are you doing?
Good morning, Chris. I'm fine. How are you?
Very good, and good to have you on to talk about this, which really last week was a bit of a bombshell in the handball world, initially reported by Duncan Mackay for the Zeus files, with some informed sources he mentioned close to the process, talking about the potential shake-up being announced later this year, where as part of the Fit for the Future initiative, that we could have indoor team sports such as handball and volleyball being offered the opportunity to shift over to the Winter Olympics. And that was then reported by Team Handball News, by John Ryan, picked up in a bunch of other handball publications, to mixed reviews. So maybe you can tell us a little bit of the background in all of this, because it's not exactly new news.
Well, the part that they want to move, probably want to move or consider moving a few sports from summer to winter, I think that's a relatively new aspect. To read it in such a concrete way as Duncan Mackay has reported at first, I think that was relatively new. But what you already referred to, the Fit for Future program, it all has a background, of course, and I think it started with Kirsty Coventry becoming the first female IOC president a year ago. What was interesting, of course, that when the term of Thomas Bach as IOC president ended, I think there was a feel of an urge that they had to change some things within the whole Olympic movement. And I think it was not without reason that Coventry was voted new president, despite having, 5 or 6 opponents. But she won the voting clear in the first round. It was basically an early knockout.
Yeah.
And I think that was a clear decision for change. Of course, she's the first woman, and until 2016, if I'm correct, she was still competing as an athlete at the Olympics as a swimmer for Zimbabwe. And mind you, just, age is maybe just a number, but not always. I think Kirsty Coventry is 42 compared to Bach, who is 72. So it tells you, I think, that some directions for the future actually started there. This something new, something fresh had to happen, and that's basically what started with the Fit for Future program. As I understand it, it's that basically all medal events from Summer and Winter Olympics are being reviewed, and we're talking about more than 450 different disciplines from more than 40 international sports federations combined for the Summer and Winter Games. They're all being reviewed, and of course, for 95% of the sports, there's no discussion at all that they will be included in future games as well. But there are some sports that that should start worrying about their Olympic future. Not without reason, that Kirsty Coventry, in her opening press conference at the recent Milan Cortina Games, said that it will become uncomfortable for some sports, the discussions that are going on. Of course, there are no decisions yet about which sports will remain Olympic, which will become Olympic, or, as we know now, maybe will move from summer to winter. So there's a lot of things going on behind closed doors, and we will only find out in the later this year, when the various committees and commissions that are thinking about these plans will come up with their reports and their reviews, actually, of the most recent Olympic Games. As for handball, it's a good point, of course. Will they move to the Winter Games? It's a very interesting prospect, but one that has, of course, but I think that's something you want to talk about a bit later. It would have massive impacts for the sport as handball as such. I think it's still to be seen what we can expect from these changes. We've seen in Paris where some new sports were added to the program, like skateboarding and 3 against 3 basketball and breakdance. But on the other hand, very traditional sports are just under doubt for the future. Modern pentathlon, for instance, which has a history of more than a century in the games.
Yeah.
It's really unsure whether we're going to see that again. Or basically had the pleasure to cover that sports back in 2012 in the London Games. And even then there was discussion about how long this sport will still survive Olympic renewal. But with the fresh wind that is blowing under Coventry, maybe that sport really should worry about the future. Talk about the winter sports. There were a few sports that are really doubtful for the future, like the Nordic combined, which is a brilliant combination of ski jumping and cross-country skiing, but has the problem that it's Olympic-wise only a men's only sport. And one of the things in the Fit for Future program is it should balance. It should be gender balanced games. So sports that are only for men that has basically not really a future. And other sports like parallel giant slalom, snowboarding, it's really being reviewed and has the chance to drop out. And lately also the sliding events are probably under the risk of dropping out of the Olympic program. So all these things, it's nothing decided yet, but you hear from the whole story that there are so many things turning or maybe not turning, and it's something that handball could be part of and become part of a switch, which they then would have to accept probably to go to the winter, because it's, as you understand, it wouldn't be a completely voluntarily swap. It's more like take the winter or you're out.
Yeah, because as you said there is these lists of sports both on the Summer Olympics and Winter Olympics program, which are really being slated as, on the chopping block, and handball is not part of that, but being considered maybe for a switch rather than being cut out completely. It seems like the sports that are genuinely under pressure are sports that maybe are not, do not have a certain following, or despite having a tradition, are not seen as, modern in any way, despite modern pentathlon's name. But, sports which, Nordic combined, I know it's quite interesting because there's always a lot of coverage around, particularly around the female athletes that are trying to get their recognition. That always captures the imagination around the Olympics time. But little did people know that it was almost seen as like a swan song in Milano Cortina. Like in the men's side, they're almost accepting that this won't be a part of the Olympics anymore. So I guess the question is, what do you think, or what have you gathered are the actual criteria here? Because it seems like it will be a massive overhaul in what these two games actually mean, because the introduction of some sports into the Winter Olympics without being held on snow or ice will completely change what it even means to a lot of people.
I think for the background, you have to look back at the three criteria, the three main parameters basically that are in the Fit for Future program. The first thing is that it should be balanced games, and that's what I mentioned before. Sports for men and for women it should be equally represented in the games. It should be more youth focused, and we've seen that especially in Paris, where some street kind of sports, like I mentioned before, like skateboarding, and so have become an Olympic status. And of course, sports should be cost efficient. I think that final thing is definitely affecting the sliding events in the Winter Games. We saw that in Cortina, where they had to rebuild a decade-old sliding venue and basically rebuild the whole infrastructure, although it would be available in not that far away. In especially Austria could have jumped in there and provide these infrastructure, but then policy comes into play, and that didn't work out. But in the end, you had to pay a lot of money to get the track back on track, so to say. So that's definitely a point where where the Olympic movement and the IOC will look at. If you then look at the individual sports, I think there are two major criteria coming into play. And it's very simple: the TV viewing figures. If there's just not enough people watching certain sports, then they're not that interesting anymore. And don't forget that the NBC, the American TV network, has a large say in this, because they're splashing out hundreds of millions of dollars each time to be the main broadcast and to have the rights for the Olympics. So they have a huge say, of course, in what should feature in them. So low TV figures is a bad thing for any sport. And another thing is when you look more at the competitive side of sports, if there are only very few countries winning all the medals each time, then that's certainly a problem. And we talked about Nordic combined before, and that's a very good example, because they have three competitions in Cortina, and they were all won by Norway with 3 gold medals, and the other 2 medals also went to the same countries for all 3 events. So that says this just basically maybe 4 or 5 nations who can actually realistically win a medal in such an event, and that's just not enough to qualify for an Olympic sport under the new rules for the future. Then, so that's certainly 2 criteria will come into play when deciding about whether a sport should remain in the program or maybe not.
From handball's perspective here, seeing the reports last week, on the American side, of course, it seems quite a exciting opportunity, because then the sport will have this higher pedestal in the Olympics, having more TV time in the Winter Games than it would in the USA for the summer. A potential hosting of it again in 2034 in Salt Lake, and also seeing in Scandinavia, let's say a tepid response to it, because these countries enjoy both games almost equally. But that is not the case around the world. And if we're being quite brutal about it, there are maybe 10 to 15 countries that actually genuinely care about the Winter Olympics. And I think a sport like handball doesn't actually expand that too much, really. You throw in Egypt into the mix, throw in maybe Brazil, which, they won their first Winter Olympics medal with a Norwegian-born athlete. I'm not sure that necessarily spreads it so much and actually spreads the attention beyond a country like the USA, where there might be a bit more attention, but not sustainable attention, because we can talk all we like about how every 4 years at the Olympics more people are interested, but the same goes for curling, and people are interested for 2 weeks about curling, and then who's going to talk about it again? People are going to forget, or the Canadian and the little finger touch will become a meme, but or has become one, but is forgotten beyond that as a sport until the next time. So is it actually something you think would be beneficial to the sport in terms of exposure and like having its place in the games? It seems like, although there's a lot of competition in the Summer Olympics, it is always very well received as a sport wherever it goes. The arenas are always packed, and even in countries where the sport is not a traditional one.
Yeah, I'm basically on your line of arguments here, Chris. I'm not sure that the sport of handball would benefit too much from this move. And like you said, it's especially from an American point of view, it is the Olympics are everything. That's the big thing every 4 years for sports, and otherwise some sports get under the radar when the Olympics are not on. And like you mentioned before, I cover a lot of alpine skiing, and that's an excellent example, because it's really hyped up by NBC and others when the Olympics are. But World Cup races, which take 5 months of almost every weekend of racing, mostly across Europe, they hardly noticed in America. And you really see people who are interested in America asking you, where can I even watch it? They really struggle to find some live streams to actually watch these races. And then the Olympics come, and certainly it's the biggest sport, and we all need to know who Michaela Schifrin or Lindsey Vonn are. So that's a little bit of a picture I could imagine for handball as well. But that's a bit what you mentioned as well, that I think handball would do probably equally well in summer as in winter games when it comes to their attention, because I think it is a very spectacular sport, and that's what we see in the 2012 games, to go back to them then again in London, which Great Britain didn't have the biggest tradition in handball, but these 2 weeks in the handball competition, I think, was very well received, and the images of the copper box and people cheering and really learning a new sport. I have very good memories of that, and I think that captured the moment so well. But the question is, does it have a legacy? Does it go on? Does it develop from there? Does it mean that youth programs start? Does it actually mean that more people are picking up the game? Does it mean that structures are coming into place to actually develop talents and build a good competition in a domestic league, where people can actually get up to a level that they are internationally competitive as well? So those questions will remain, and I don't think that will change much if we play handball in summer or in winter. Apart from being at the Olympics, I just mentioned it briefly before, I think it would have massive impact for the whole scheduling of the sport if you have the Olympics in February and maybe even in January, because that's one of the things as well what the IOC is considering, to bring the Winter Olympics 1 month forward, so not in February as has been usual for a long time, I guess, but to January. And that has also to do with the fact that the Paralympics, which also follow a few weeks after the Winter Games, are now in March. But it's increasingly problematic to find winter sport venues where you can have this kind of competitions in March. So the really serious considerations to bring it all forward. But in January, well, I don't have to tell you what handball competitions are usually on in January. So that would mean a whole rethinking of the schedule once every 4 years. Should we give up a Euro or should we give up a World Championship? It's an interesting question.
Yeah, probably not the worst thing from a player's point of view as well. But that is an interesting side topic. You mentioned there about the potential shifting of the games to January. The shifting climate and the sustainability of the whole concept of the Winter Olympics is also something that has come up more and more. And, there's maybe a wonder if handball would be then jumping on a sinking ship in that regard, because you've also covered over the years the increasingly difficult conditions for athletes chasing the snow, so to speak, around the world, and how there are fewer and fewer countries that are actually available to host these traditional winter sports. Is that also part of maybe the whole thinking here, that we not rely on winter for the Winter Olympics? And if so, is it going to be so dramatic that we just have, 2 Olympics in a 4-year cycle, and what is winter, what is summer almost becomes blurred?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Actually, but that's really a discussion for the far future, of course. But it's within all winter sports, it is an increasing concern that the time frame where you can actually organize winter sports at top level is becoming ever more narrow. There's a very narrow gap, but that's only closing down. Or you have to look at completely different regions. I mean, all alpine skiers, for instance, they go to Chile or New Zealand to train, and maybe there is potential to do some more. But then you have a completely different time schedule again, because they have winter at a different time. So then again, the question is, what is Winter Games, and when are you going to stage them? So if you stick to this February or maybe January time frame for Winter Olympics, it's definitely a good question. Where can we do them in a couple of decades? I mean, it won't be the problem for the foreseeable future. But it's definitely a good question. I mean, there are a lot of initiatives taken to address the issue, but I don't hear really constructive solutions so far. I mean, I always find it quite funny when the International Ski and Snowboard Federation calls themselves the greenest sports body that there is around, but then sending skiers around the world with a schedule where you could say that it would easily be doable to reduce the traveling, for instance. And it's a good point. What is winter? What is summer in the far future? And yeah, you can only hope, of course, that the doom scenario is not that you put the games into a winter schedule and then that kind of games fade out in the long run, because it's
that would be a worry, because there are always people who may be offering these kind of doomsday quotes, but former winter athletes that are saying they don't even know if their sport will be around in 20 years, which is maybe also going to be shifted further with the changes in this. When we wrote yesterday about doing this, you wrote to me, maybe tongue-in-cheek, indoor handball to the Winter Olympics and beach handball to the Summer Olympics, which I'm sure a lot of people would be happy about if that was a package deal, something which beach handball has been knocking on the door with. And in some of these criteria, also talking about youth-orientated sports and modern kind of gender equal sports could fit in very nicely. It would be quite a jump, but we've seen similar things from the IOC recently. The only thing I would wonder there is the reason that handball would be shifted over in the first place is that they also want to bring down the number of sports in the summer games. So it's not like you take away a few hundred athletes from indoor handball, that there's room all of a sudden for a fully fledged beach tournament in Brisbane in 2032.
No, exactly. There was a bit of wishful thinking, of course, when I wrote that to you yesterday. It would be, of course, kind of win-win scenario to keep the regular handball tournament, but also get beach handball into it. But if you look at the criteria we talked about before, then for sure beach handball should have a good cause, a good chance to make it to the summer games one day. On the other hand, it is, the future will be fewer events, maybe a few different and a few new events, but in general, fewer medal events. And it's hard to imagine that we have both handball variations being Olympic. Having said that, volleyball has them all. We have beach volleyball and we have indoor volleyball. But then volleyball, I think the reach of volleyball worldwide still exceeds the reach of handball in that matter. So that might be an explanation for that. But just looking at the objective criteria, there's basically there's no reason why I say that could never happen. So I don't think it's a realistic scenario, especially not for the very foreseeable future. But don't rule it out. I think that the sport of beach handball has made huge developments in especially in the last 10, 15 years. It has become a way more competitive and professionally run sport than it was before, which was, of course, more a fun addition to the indoor game. And players who just played the indoor game went outside in the summer and for fun threw some balls on the beach. I think that the sport has really developed in a good direction and is basically managed pretty well. So that's certainly some criteria that could help them actually maybe one day make that jump and actually become an Olympic sport. As
we said at the top, the next Congress in June is where it seems that something will be revealed. As Duncan Mackay wrote, the plans being discussed are far more radical than anything that has been revealed publicly up until now. What is your gut feeling? Do you think it will be a radical change, or do you think the truth will be somewhere between what is currently the case and what the radical solutions are?
Chris, the thing with this usually is when some major changes are predicted or maybe ahead or not, usually someone within an organization who has some knowledge about what might be coming up or what is discussed, he lets out some information, and that's not because they are going to decide that, but maybe they consider that they just want to get a feel of how does this drop with the sports community, how does this how is this accepted or not within the handball community. So I think that's kind of, they're just getting a bit of a feel for how such plans might be accepted or not. Is there a huge backlash, or say people, wow, that's a cool idea, let's do this? So I think they're just getting a little bit of an idea what this might be or not. And usually, it's a big organization. And we talked about Kirsty Coventry as a new leader with a fresh wind, but still there's so many committees and commissions and so many boards that have a say before anything is decided about future sports. So I think it's more a gradual development, and we will see some changes for sure, and we will see more and faster changes than we've seen under the leadership of Thomas Bach. I'm sure of that. If it's all that spectacular already now to be decided as soon as in June, I highly doubt that will be the case.
Handball's place in Brisbane and the Australians planning for those Olympics may be safe after all, but we will see. We'll stay in touch about that. Thanks for your insight, Eric. Fascinating stuff, and thanks for taking the time this morning.
Thanks, Chris. It was my pleasure.